A couple of summers ago, my dad and I decided to go on a camping trip together. We often like to get away from busy life, just the two of us, far from any hint of the city. This time, we picked a spot neither of us had visited before, a simple campground in the foothills, miles away from home, bordered by thick woods and rolling hills. The drive was long, but easy. When we arrived, we found cheerful campers already settling in, laughter drifting across the park, smoke rising from fire pits, and swings creaking as kids played nearby. The air smelled of pine and charcoal. It felt comfortable, like nothing unusual could ever happen in a place like this. That first night, everything was normal. Families sat around their fires, telling jokes, grilling food, and sharing the leftover s'mores with us. My dad and I walked down the gravel trails, talked to some friendly strangers, and fell asleep to the sound of distant owls and crackling logs. The next morning, we made breakfast on a little propane stove, mostly just eggs and toast. The weather was perfect. We spent that day fishing by a shallow creek and hiking the shortest trail, not wanting to tire ourselves out. The quiet, the fresh air, it was everything we needed to recharge. Late in the afternoon, we heard from the woman at the park office that we'd be the only ones at the site that night. Everyone else was heading home after the weekend. I remember my dad looking surprised but not worried. Honestly, I was kind of excited. It felt like we had the whole place to ourselves, a private getaway in the woods. By evening, the last pickup truck rolled out, cooler rattling in the bed. The campground went quiet, except for the sound of wind and a few evening birds. We cooked a basic dinner, then wandered over to the main building to charge our phones and stock up on snacks for the night. Leaving the lighted warmth of the building was when the mood started to change. The sun was almost gone, and as we followed the gravel path back, I noticed how differently the trees looked in the dim light. They felt taller and closer than before. The woods behind our tent just seemed deeper and heavier. My dad was quiet, which was odd for him. About halfway there, he whispered, "Do you feel weird?" I nodded. The air had a heaviness and my chest started to feel kind of tight. Sometimes the wind would die down for a moment and everything would be uncomfortably still. We didn't talk much after that, just made our way back to our campsite and put a few more logs on the fire. We tried to distract ourselves with music on an old Bluetooth speaker, toasted some marshmallows, and laughed at our own random memories from past camping trips. For a little while, things felt close to normal again. When darkness finally settled, no lights from other campsites cut through the black. It was just us, our little fire, and the heaviness all around. Then we heard a sudden noise. It wasn't like the usual pops and cracks from the fire. It was a loud thud, maybe like something heavy landing somewhere in the woods behind us. Dad thought a branch might have fallen, but there hadn't been any wind. We shined our flashlights toward the sound, but saw nothing but tree trunks and our own breath in the cold night air. About 10 or 15 minutes went by. Then, just as we started to relax, there was another sound, a bit closer. This one felt heavier. The two of us exchanged glances, a quiet agreement not to make a big deal out of it. But we both listened for it. After a while, it happened again. Only now it sounded like it was almost at the edge of our campsite, just past the reach of the firelight. Dad's face got serious. We stopped talking and packed away any food still left out, like both of us knew it was smarter to be careful. One last time, a final boom, louder, almost shaking the ground beneath us. Now it felt like there was something actually out there, watching from the shadows between the trees. With nothing left to do, we tossed some fresh wood on the fire, zipped ourselves into the tent, and stayed as quiet as we could. I remember lying flat, listening to my heartbeat while Dad sat by the entrance holding onto his pocket knife. It was quiet for a while, uncomfortably so. Then a new noise started. Not a bang this time, but a strange low hum, almost like a vibration. It wasn't just a sound, but something you could almost feel in your chest. Dad whispered, "Are you hearing that?" I nodded, barely breathing. A few minutes passed like this. The noise came and went, mixed with distant, strange sounds that didn't fit any animal I knew. There was a cold, electric feeling in the air, like a silent warning. At some point, I thought about checking the window flap, but I couldn't get myself to move. I was too scared someone, something, might be looking right back at me. Just when the fear felt worst, something odd happened. Both Dad and I lost track of time. One moment we were wide awake, too scared to blink. The next, sunlight was soaking through the tent fabric. It was morning. I sat up fast, confused, remembering the night's fear like it was still happening. My dad was already awake, clutching his pocket knife tight, eyes wide like he'd been up all night. The strangest part, both our phones were dead, even though we made sure they were charged the evening before. Nothing else in the tent was touched. No food dragged off by animals, and the fire pit was just a pile of cold ash. We stepped outside, both needing to use the bathroom but still nervous to leave each other's sight. The woods looked totally normal in the daylight, but the two of us stayed quiet, half listening for more weird sounds. We packed up quickly, barely talking. Once we were in the car, safe and on the road, we finally started piecing together what we remembered. Dad said at one point he thought he saw a tall, dark shape just at the edge of the trees, somewhere the firelight couldn't reach. I never saw anything myself, but the feeling of being watched never went away. When we got back, we tried to explain the night to Mom. She suggested maybe it was just nerves or maybe even something in the air. But both of us agreed something was different about that place. Neither of us wanted to camp again, at least not for a long time. We still talk about it sometimes, usually late at night when neither of us can sleep. I don't know what happened, and I'm not sure I ever want to find out. But whatever it was, it changed how I look at quiet nights in the woods.
I'm 23 and live by myself in a small apartment. Not long before settling in here, I became good friends with someone I met at work. For a few months, we really clicked, texting every day, calling often, sharing stories about anything and everything. She always seemed to remember the little details, from my favorite foods to random things I'd mentioned once in passing. She liked to keep my photos saved and sometimes got upset if I didn't reply quickly, but I figured she was just thoughtful. Not long after she moved to another state for work, we decided to plan a long weekend together. She would fly in and stay at my place. I went all out, cleaned the apartment, bought her favorite snacks, and lined up plans for each day. She landed on a Thursday afternoon. I picked her up at the airport in a flurry of hugs and gifts. She gave me a bracelet and a note, all smiles and excitement. Back at my apartment, she poked around, asking about new decorations, and even noticing tiny changes like a new candle. That night, we grabbed dinner and headed to a club nearby. She stuck by my side all night, holding my hand a lot, even after we left. It was a little intense, but I figured it's just how she was. Sometime after midnight, we got home. I set up the pull-out couch for her with fresh sheets and said goodnight. I was exhausted and fell asleep fast. Sometime during the night, I woke up with the strange feeling that I wasn't alone in my room. I opened my eyes and saw her sitting straight up on the edge of my bed, staring ahead, weirdly stiff. Then, wordless, she stood up and walked out. When I went to check on her, the couch still looked untouched. She was already in the kitchen making tea, acting as if nothing strange had happened. The next morning felt awkward, but we tried to stick to our plans, walking through city streets, stopping for coffee, checking out a shop or two. She kept close, often walking with her arm linked through mine. Sometimes, though, she'd go quiet out of nowhere, barely responding during lunch, mostly just staring at her phone. Later, at the arcade, something unsettled me. I saw her photo on one of those driving game setups. While my profile shot was silly, hers was different. Head tilted down, eyes staring wide and blank at the camera, like she was looking straight through it. I snapped a picture of the screen because it felt so odd. Back at my place, she quietly flipped through my old photo albums without saying much. During dinner, her answers were short. I put on a movie I knew she liked, hoping it would lighten the mood, but she just sat at the edge of the couch, hardly reacting even when she usually would have laughed. The second morning together was even more awkward. We walked through a park and got coffee, but she barely touched her drink and watched people passing by instead of talking. Each time I checked if she was all right, she brushed it off. Lunch at a diner was silent. She was cold to the staff and left her food untouched. On the drive home, the atmosphere grew heavier. I tried to distract with music, but she leaned against the window, eyes closed, unmoving. That night, she didn't say goodnight or even acknowledge me before heading to the couch. For the first time since I'd moved in, I locked my bedroom door. I barely slept, tense with every creak and shuffle from the other room. Her flight was early. Restless, I got up in the middle of the night, quietly packed her bag, and found her sitting awake in the dark before dawn. The drive to the airport was wordless. She barely nodded when I spoke, looking everywhere but at me. At the terminal, her goodbye was nothing. No embrace, just a flat, "It was fine," and she disappeared inside. Back home, the silence in my place felt even heavier than before. I cleaned up, put away the couch, and washed the blanket she never used. There was no "I landed safe" message, just emptiness. Later that night, I saw she'd posted photos from her trip. Selfies from the club, shots from the arcade, all with captions like "mine," each one tagging me. She hadn't texted, hadn't said anything to me directly, but there she was, making it look like we shared this perfect weekend. Friends and family started messaging. Some joked it sounded like something out of a horror movie. Others told me to block her and asked me if I was all right. Part of me wanted to reach out and ask what changed, but another part of me felt sick, wondering if she'd been watching me sleep, treating me like something to own. I realize now I won't let her visit again, and I'm still processing how fast things shifted from normal to strange. For now, my door stays locked, and I keep my phone on silent if her name pops up. I don't know what made her change, or if there were signs I missed. I just know that sense of unease hasn't quite gone away.
Last fall, during a school camping trip, something happened that I still think about sometimes. At the time, I was 15 and in my second year of high school. Our group had 10 students and 2 teachers, and we headed out to a campsite a couple of hours from town. The spot was pretty basic, just an open field big enough for our tents, surrounded by trees and not much else. I shared a tent with a girl from my class. We weren't close friends, more like friendly, but we got along fine. We arrived after lunch on Friday, unpacked, and then went off for a short walk through the woods as a group. About 20 minutes into the trail, we passed by this old stone building, off to the side, covered in vines. One of our teachers explained it was an old chapel, but that we weren't supposed to go poking around. Still, a few kids couldn't resist and checked it out through the doorway. They came back laughing, saying it was just empty and full of broken chairs. That first night, we sat around the fire and played some card games. It felt like any other camping trip. People laughing, the fire popping, teachers pretending not to notice the snacks we'd snuck in. On Saturday morning, we had a simple breakfast, then spent most of the day hiking with our teachers. We passed the chapel again, but no one stopped this time. I noticed a few people stared at it a little longer, their eyes darting away when someone caught them looking. In the afternoon, we broke off for some free time. Some students went down to the creek. I stuck close to the tents with my tent mate and a couple of others. As the sun set, we ate dinner, then gathered around the fire, tired from the long day. At 10, our teachers sent everyone to their tents. I crawled into my sleeping bag, expecting to fall asleep fast. I'm not sure what woke me, but I opened my eyes and could tell the entire camp was silent. I lay still, listening for that usual background buzz, wind, crickets, something. But all I heard was one single, clear metallic sound, almost like a bell. Short, not loud, but definitely out of place. My tent mate whispered, asking if I'd heard it too. I said yes, and that was all we said. Neither of us really wanted to keep talking in the dark. The next morning, after breakfast, our teachers gave us some free time before lunch. My tent mate wandered toward the creek, but I felt drawn to the old chapel, maybe because of the sound the night before. I didn't tell anyone, just made my way quietly toward it. At the clearing's edge, I saw more details. A faded plaque on the wall, half covered in ivy. I pulled the leaves away and could just make out the name of a girl who died at 15, more than 100 years ago. The date was so old it didn't feel real. I got a little closer and peeked inside. The place looked abandoned. No rope for the bell, just a rusted bell that looked like it hadn't moved for ages. It made no sense how any sound could have rung out during the night. For a moment, I thought I heard soft movement inside. Maybe just leaves shifting, maybe something else. When I tried to listen more, it went quiet again. That was enough for me. I turned back to camp and didn't mention going there to anyone. The rest of the day was normal. People joked and packed up, talking about homework and weekend plans. Early the next morning we left, and by the time I got home, everything felt kind of like a dream, but the memory stuck. Later, I tried finding anything about that chapel or the girl whose name was on the plaque. I never found any answers about what happened there or why it was left forgotten in those woods. Even now, whenever someone brings up camping or hiking, that single strange sound and that lonely building always come back to me. Sometimes the quietest places end up leaving the deepest marks.